tags are a great way to add interest to your junk journals, and they give you space on which you can write if you wanted to capture a moment or capture a memory, and they can also be used as pockets as well. But there's loads of ways that you can jazz up a tag. Now, to create your tags, I'm assuming that we're not dealing with dies or any standard crafting equipment, that we're making these just with things that you have around the house. So this is a couple of tags in standard sizes. Now the measurements are on these. I've done them in inches and millimeters as well, so you can see exactly what the sizes are. I've cut these using a die, but I've also prepared a couple of our pieces of paper from our books and one of the papers that we stained, and I've measured the sizes from this tag because these pages are too small to take the big tag. So I've taken the measurements of this tag here, and it's 60 millimeters by 120 millimeters, and I'm just going to cut out those rectangles. On this piece it actually is folded, so when I cut this I'm going to have two tags. That's the first couple of rectangles, and it's the same with this, which is one of the pages from my botanical book. Now I have seen a comment where somebody has said that they buy these books and that they can't bring themselves to cut them out, and I totally understand that. If you wanted to keep any of the pages in your book, you can photocopy them and then you'll always have the original, or you could look at it a different way. Let me offer you this as a way of looking of getting around the difficulty of cutting up beautiful books, because I genuinely do understand that. These books, maybe if we bought them from a charity shop, they were on a shelf, they weren't being opened, they weren't being used. These illustrations were hidden, they weren't being seen. By using these printed pieces of ephemera in our junk journals, we're giving them another zest for life. We're using them, we're getting them out there, we're repurposing them, and we're making sure that they're being seen, whereas if they stayed in their book, they wouldn't be seen. Try that, see if that helps. I'm going to cut this one out as well. I haven't photocopied this, I am just using the original page from the book, and I still have, oh, that's quite nice actually, I didn't expect that. That's quite an, oh, that's given me an idea, like that. So I still have this piece as well, and it also has some lovely little fragments on the back which tell you about the individual flowers. So this is a very useful scrap to have. I'm going to hang on to this piece because that's given me a little idea. And I'll finish cutting down this rectangle. Now all you have to do for your tags, you can make yourself a template. These are pre-cut using a die machine, so I'm not going to cheat and just do that and work out where the corners are, even though that would be really easy to do. I'm just going to do it by eye. I'm going to use my ruler, pop these to one side. So I know that a tag corner is about half an inch down from the top. So even though I don't like measuring, I am going to measure this because it's going to be my template for the rest of my tags. So there's half an inch. So I'll do a little light line across like that, and then I'm going to do one corner, and I'm going to show you a really easy way to make sure your corners are the same. Well, there's a couple of ways that you could do it actually. What you could do is you could fold this in half and then you could chop across, and then you know they'll be the same. Another way to do it is to measure one. When you're happy with that, chop it off and then reverse it, put it on the other side, and then you're using the corner as a template. Oops. And if you can draw a straight line, you can just draw where that was, and then that will give you a tag, and I think that's pretty close to the original. It's close enough to hopefully give you confidence that you don't need to buy a special die cutter or anything like that to make a tag. So that's our first one, and I'm going to cut the rest of them, cut their corners off so that they all match. Now that we have 3 tags all cut to the same size and shape, there's a couple of ways that you can add the hole in the top. You could use a standard hole punch, a lever arch hole punch file, and just use one hole. So just put it in, you know how there's usually two holes in a hole punch, just stick it under one hole and squish it and create a hole. I'm going to use this, which is my crocodile, which is designed to put holes in things, and I'm just going to do it by eye. So there we have 3 tags ready to go. I'm going to show you a few ways to decorate tags, although as I keep saying there's no rules, it's true. So once I show you a few variations, hopefully you will feel happy enough to kick off on your own. I've just cut down a piece of paper from one of my waste scraps, and I want to give it a slightly rough edge. I don't want a smooth edge as I have at the moment, so I'm going to line up my ruler, and then by ripping towards you, you can give it a wobbly ripped edge. I don't need all of this piece, but I may decide to use it on other tags, so I may as well just keep ripping, and I'm going to just use it to cover up the top and the bottom. So I'm going to get my glue, and I'm just going to stick this on top, and then when it's stuck I'll turn it over and I'll use my scissors just to cut it down to size. So I'm putting glue on roughly where I think I will stick the tag. I want it to go all the way up to the top. Did I say stick the tag? I meant stick the paper. I often say the wrong word, you may have noticed. So that's that one, and if I can find my scissors, I'm going to cut this down. I'm not going to worry about the hole at the top just now. I will come back to that and add that once I'm finished. So that's the top bit. I'm going to use a little on the bottom. Don't need quite as much of that, and I want it to be slightly rougher. So now I'm just going to rip it by hand. That's better. And to make sure I don't put glue absolutely everywhere, I'm just going to tuck that under so I know roughly where I want the glue to go. I'm using that fold as my my end point for the gluing, and I'm just adding a light layer of glue. And when I snip that off, that looks quite good. If I want to strengthen this tag, I've got a couple of tags that I cut earlier. I could add it to this one, or I could just tie it to this one, and then you can use this part for journaling, for writing on, or you could flip it over and you could use the inside. You don't have to use it this way up either, you could use it that way up. So let's do that. Let's add the hole. Again, I'm using my crocodile tool, and it has 2 settings. It has a large hole and it has a small hole. I hope you can see. And I'm going to use the large hole. I have a piece of the ribbon that we that we dyed earlier on using our spritz spray from the tea bag mix. And if I pop this through the hole, if I can get it through the hole, That's what I should have said. Oh look, done it. Pop that through the hole, tie it at the top. I'll do a double knot to make sure it stays in place and doesn't unravel. There we go. There's a tag. If you remember the corrugated card that we saved in the first video when we were looking at source material, this is just a piece of packaging. I've cut it down to make a tag shape as well, but I've also trimmed a couple of little strips that I can use on other tags. So here is a tag which I've cut from white cardboard. I've stuck a piece of our stained paper on the top of it. I've put one of my strips of corrugated card across the bottom, and from my flower page I've cut out, just with my scissors, I've cut out around the outside of one of the flowers. I want to make this a little bit 3D, and I'm going to use the corrugated card to do that. I've got a nice space at the back of this flower head, which will take two pieces of corrugated card stuck together. I want to stick it in such a way that that card won't show through on the front. And I'm sticking one piece on top of another to give it extra dimension. So then it won't look like it's a flat flower stuck onto the tag, it will stand out a little bit more. I'm going to just chop down the bottom there. That's better. And I'm going to angle my flower. I can now stick this piece in place. This is a little bottom piece. And I'll put some glue on the back of my corrugated card. And I can stick that in place as well. And it adds dimension to the flower without making it stick out too far. So you have a slightly 3D tag. So if you find corrugated card, it's useful to hang on to that. To complete the tag, I'm going to take some more of the lovely ribbon that we coloured with our tea dye stain. That's not bad for me. My bows are usually pretty dreadful. You can tell if I've just tied it and I've left loose ends, I'm having a bad bow day. To make sure that that stays in position, I'm going to add a little bit of glue on the back, which will just hold it. Oops, come off my corrugated card. I want it to be sort of across the middle of that corrugated card. That looks ideal. And I just need one tiny little dab of glue to hold that in place. That little strip of ribbon means that when you come to do any writing on the reverse of this, it's not completely plain and bare. You've got something else there. And if you really wanted to jazz it up, you would add another piece of paper to the bottom there. Just a little line of glue to hold that in place. That looks quite pretty. So now you've got interest on the front of your tag with your 3D flower effect and your bow, and you've also got a little bit of interest on the back. And I like these sorts of things, it's nice to, if you're writing on just a blank tag, you know, like that, before we added that, it feels taggy, just very plain. But once you've added a little bit of zhuzh, it just makes it feel a little bit more special and it makes it more tactile. I'm using one of the largest tags, and I've cut this from some craft card, so it's a little bit more robust. And I've prepared 3 different types of paper from our little stash that we've created, and I've just checked my positioning, so I've added some folds in here to make it absolutely clear where these are going. So what we're going to do is a zigzag, so we're going to make a tag that's actually got 3 little tuck pockets in it, and I'm going to start with this one. So when we're doing 3 below each other, you start at the top. Because I've got my lines, my folds, I know exactly where to cut. And I know that this is going to sit at that angle. So that's why I did the folds around the card. I'm going to add a little layer of glue here because I folded the top over to make sure it's nice and strong and it won't rip when tags and little things are being put in and out of that little pocket. And now I'm going to put a line of glue down the sides, along the bottom, because we don't want anything to fall through, and across the top. And I'm going to position that right about there. Once the glue is dried, I'll turn the tag over and I'll cut over any loose pieces or any bits that are sticking out. My next layer, I've already tested this, is going to go at a slightly different angle. This is where I get to be as wonky as I want, and it's okay. So that's going to go at that sort of an angle. It doesn't matter that there's a rough edge on the bottom of this, by the way, because it's going to be hidden. See where it's ripped? It's going to be hidden, so that's okay. And I'll glue that into position about there, I think. And then my last piece, I've also folded this on the bottom edge, so I know exactly where it's going to go. So that's fine. I'll chop that down. I'll chop off some of the lace as well, that's fine, that doesn't matter. And as before, well, this one I don't need to sew the fold, I don't need to glue the fold over because it's already sewn over. So I'm only doing 2 outside edges and the base. That's my tag, and it's got 3 separate pockets into which we can put tags or little pictures if we have little pictures. And all you need to do is put a ribbon on the top of that. I've taken this tag to my sewing machine and I've done a little zigzag stitch around the outside edges but not the top, and I just want to quickly show you a different way that you can tie your tags at the top. I'm using the rather nice binding tape that we dyed earlier on. I've put it through, just poked it through the hole and done a loop, and to make it a little bit more interesting I'm going to take another piece and I'm just going to tie it there. I'll do a double knot to keep it secure. That just makes it a little bit different. This tag, I've taken a plain craft card background and I've stuck on one of our pieces of paper from one of our books that's also been cut down to size, and I've sewn in quite broad zigzags. It's easier to show you on the reverse. I've sewn through both layers in random strips If you don't have a sewing machine or you don't do sewing, that's absolutely fine. All you need to do is, where I've used sewing stitches, just put a line of glue, stick the printed piece on the top of the glue lines, and then let it dry. The reason I've done that is because I'm going to rip this away, and it's going to leave us with some distressed, shabby marks on our tag. And when I pulled all of those away, I'm going to use some of our printed papers to make some flowers. And I will finish doing this, and then I'll come back to you when it's done. This is how my tag looks now that I've ripped away all that extra paper that wasn't held in place with the stitching. I've left the little threads hanging at the moment. I may cut those off. I'm going to see how I feel about the tag later on, and I'm going to make some very simple, straightforward flowers. So I've taken one of our sheets from our books that we dyed, I folded it in half and then in half again, and I've used my glue bottle just to go around, draw around the bottom of the glue bottle with a black pen, and I'm going to cut these out, and I'm going to do the same with some white photocopy paper. So I will do a couple of sizes, a medium and a small size probably, in that white paper, and I'll cut those out as well. I'm working on my craft sheet now because things are going to get wet and messy, and I've cut out circles, so each of these rows of circles will create a flower. So I've gone from a large size all the way down to a little size, and I'm going to use my water spray. I'm going to use the glycerin water mix that we used in the I think the first video when we were making the crumpled cereal box. This will just help me squash up my my pieces of paper without the risk of them ripping too much. I'm just going to spritz them all quite lightly. I'm going to try and keep them in their rows because that will save me trying to work out later on which bit goes with which bit. And then when they're soaked, I'll scrunch them. When I've scrunched them all, oops, I'm going to give them another little spray of water. All I want to do is create a little bit of texture, so I don't want it to be just a flat circle. I want it to have some dimension to it, and scrunching it up will put nice little folds in the paper, and it will make it more interesting when we layer the flowers up. Now I'm going to unscrunch them, but I'm not going to lay them out again flat. I'm just going to lay them out like this, again in their rows. While the circles are still a little bit damp and a little bit malleable, take your glue and add a little spot into the middle of each of the circles and lay them up so that the smaller one goes on the larger one. Only glue in the middle. We don't want to flatten these out, we want to try and keep as much dimension in them as we can. So I'm only pressing in the middle of each of the centres. These are very satisfying to make, and you can make them in any colour. They work really quite nicely all in white, or at Christmas time they look really nice in red, and they're quite quick to assemble. And it means that any time you need some ornamentation on a tag, you can, whatever supplies you have around you, you can use and you can make. You don't have to buy special little flowers. I've always managed to resist buying special little flowers. I think I've only bought a set once, and they're so pretty I don't want to use them, which completely defeats the object of buying them. So I'm just bringing the edges in, crinkling them a little bit where I think they need some extra crinkle. And we've got 3 little flowers, and they'll dry out nice and crispy, and they'll hold their shape and add dimension to our tag. And our tag is here. So I'm going to, this one I think, I'm going to pinch this, I'm going to fold it over and then in a little bit, and I'm going to pinch it just in the centre because I want that to be a little smaller. I could make a smaller flower, but I've got these here and I think I'll just use this one. I'm going to add some extra stuff to our tag. So I've got one of the strips from the cereal pack where we distressed this edge. I'm just going to see if I can fit these around that. If I made that a band, that would be quite pretty. So I'm going to just tear this and probably put it a little higher as well. This has got lovely wrinkles and texture in it from the work that we did on it before, which I think was in the first video. I'm going to glue that in place. So it's worth keeping any offcuts when you're working because it's always useful to have a little piece just to pop in. I'm adding a little more detail to the tag now. So with my flowers, I've taken some green thread that I have in my embroidery box, and I've taken a needle and just put 2 pieces of thread through the back, and then I've tied them into a little bow in the middle of my flower, and I've done that for all 3 of them. I've also made a little leaf. Now I made this by taking the cardboard that we used, the cereal cardboard, and I just took off this top layer because underneath it is quite nice colour variation. So then I took some scissors to make this one. I just took, let's do it this end, I just took a pair of scissors and cut in a semicircle, and then the other way. You don't even need to draw this out, it's just 2 semicircles. And I'll do another one. Make them quite fat because then it's easier for you to, you've got a bigger space to do your sewing on. And then I'm just going to sew a leaf, just using a running stitch. I can't do anything more complicated than a running stitch or a back stitch. I'm not even sure what stitch I'm doing, but I'm just doing that design in the thread. Oh, I've pulled it through. I'm just going to hang on to that piece because we're going to glue this leaf into position, so it doesn't matter about that back piece. And I should say, I'm no sewer. If I try embroidery, it just looks like a spider crawling around. It's not good. This can be as random as you like. It's not about the stitching, it's about adding texture and interest to your tag and using as much of the material available that we found and sourced in the first video, and using that without needing too many additional supplies. When I do my little fronds coming out of that main stem, I'm going back into the original hole. I'm not adding new holes to this other than where the frond sticks out. So there, straight back into the same hole. This is just nice, quick and easy, but it will add extra interest to your tag. There we go, and cut those. So now I have another leaf, very, very wonky leaf. I'm going to finish this one and then I'm going to position everything on the tag. I've glued down the first 2 flowers and one of the leaves, and I'm just scrunching these up. When you glue them down, don't sort of leave them all separate, just push them all in together. It makes it a little bit more interesting. I'm just gluing them in the centre. Again, I'm not going to glue them around the edges, because then there's a risk that they will glue flat, and we want them to maintain their dimension. And with these, you can see where that rough end was that I didn't worry about. Normally you tie a knot, wouldn't you, in the end of your thread, but I didn't bother doing that because I just want to capture the threads when I glue the leaves into position. There we go. That's another tag completed with just using very, very basic equipment. In addition to the first 4, which I showed you being made, I've made another 4 which just develop different ideas. This one, for example, I've cut a picture from our botanical book. That image book is very, very useful. It's always a good idea to have a book like that. It could have been birds, it could have been butterflies, but it's a useful type of image to have that you can pop onto a tag or use in your journal. So I've simply layered that with a couple of our cut tags, and then I've ignored the central hole, and I've put some string through the top and just tied it in a very simple knot. And you can write on the tag underneath or on the white space as well. Another tag that allows you to do quite a lot of writing is this one. I've cut out one of the flowers from my paper. I've also cut out one of the stories of the flowers from my book as well. And I've created a little notebook. You can see there lots of pages, and they just open out and you can use them to write about a memory, maybe add your own ephemera, maybe a ticket or a receipt or something. I haven't put ribbon in the top of that, but you get the idea from the rest of them that you can put whatever you want in there: string, ribbon, lace, whatever you have to hand. This tag has layers, so there's a piece of paper at the back that has some writing on it, and then an image which I've cut out on the front, and I've done a little bit of stitching, some zigzag stitching on there. So this is a group of about 6 tags, all tied together at the top with a staple through a piece of lace and a piece of our pre-dyed ribbon, and there are lots of places in there that you can add journaling. This is not designed for journaling, there's no space on this to write at all, but I wanted to show you places, ways of doing texture. And this tag is full of texture, it's full of layers, and this has just been built up using the things that we've gathered, our books, our botanical book, where I've cut another of the pictures out, and it's all on a white, plain white, large tag, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 layers in this. That would make a great design for the front cover of your journals. It's lovely and busy, it's very, very tactile. You just want to know more about that, I think. There's some stitching in there as well, and at the edges of the paper I've just rolled it over and crumpled it in my fingers. So nothing difficult at all there, and if you didn't want to add stitching you could just glue it in place, or as I've done here you could just use some little staples to attach things as well. If you wanted, you could make this a space for journaling. You could just sew, say maybe the top 3 layers, you could sew those together down one side so that this opened. This little tag opens, for example, but you could make 3 or 4 of those pages open so that you would write on the inside of that. I haven't done that on this occasion. I just wanted to show you that you don't need clever equipment in order to be able to create lots and lots of layers. So I hope that tag is of interest as well. These were all made using very basic equipment. There's nothing in here that I don't think you might have in your house. It's paper, it's cardboard, it's some thread, it's a little bit of embroidery thread, it's some stitching, and it's some staples. I think I'm going to have to make another video for you where I show you different ways of making tags using some other items such as inks, rubber stamps, and maybe some stencils. So I think we need to do more work on tags, but I hope this is enough to give you an idea of the variety that you can create using very straightforward and simple items. Thank you very much for your company, thank you for joining me, and I hope we see each other again soon for the next video. Take care.